Shalom everyone, and thanks for joining us on another episode of Crossing Boundaries. My name is Kim Yosef. I'm streaming to you live from Tel Aviv, Israel today. And together with me is my wonderful co-host and co-founder of Menjidi Tours, Aziz Abusera. Want to say hello?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm excited about today's episode as we're talking about Christianity in the Middle East, which is the birthplace of Christianity. And it's amazing because I was preparing for today, and I know there are so many different groups that have come out of the Middle East, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, a lot of the trouble in the world we've brought to you. But also I was preparing, reading about the different sects and different groups that exist here. And it's been really a fun week because I've traveled around, I've met people from different groups. And as I was reading, I realized there are so many other groups I don't know about. And it was just fun week to read about all these different smaller sects, smaller groups. But today we bring in people from different backgrounds, bringing people who are friends of ours, people who work with us, and we're going to talk about their unique perspectives, their unique backgrounds, and their community, which I think is going to be fascinating. One, to see the diversity of the Christian community in the Middle East, but also to realize how rooted this community is, which I find really, and the history of it as well is fascinating.
And it's just the beginning of our new series, People Are People, which comes to show the amount of diversity that we have here in the Middle East. I mean, we're talking about Christians, and we have 4 guests today that are going to talk about different denominations and show us their own communities. And I think that that's just the tip of the iceberg of what's going on in this region. But before we do, we've actually been working on a virtual touring option that we're very happy to start showing off. We created a short teaser for our 360 virtual touring, and we're happy to show it to you for the first time now. We'll also be sending it over later. That's something that we're planning on having available for whoever is interested. Shannon, there we go.
Ready? Hello. Shalom, everybody.
Good morning, guys.
We're very excited to be here.
Hey, guys. I am Elias.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Stein.
Hello. My name is Emily. My name is Morgan, and I have the pleasure of living in the streets.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mahmoud Abreid.
It's very good to see you. My name is Shai Goren.
Hey guys, I'm Alex Apritsky. I'm a tour guide here in the old city of Jerusalem.
Today I'll be guiding you on a short but wonderful tour.
If you look over there, right in front of me to my left,
standing at one of the wonderful places,
The most sensitive site in the whole world.
And not far from here, we go to the right.
I hope you've enjoyed.
Thank you very much for listening.
All right. That's just a taste of what we can do on our videos. Actually, when you watch a 360 video on YouTube or on your phone, you're able to kind of turn your phone around and move with the video, so you feel like you're on an actual tour, looking around while the guide is talking. And Aziz, I have to say, I mean, I took part in a lot of the filming of these movies that we just saw, which is exciting, first of all, but I don't know if you recognized a lot of the spots. I mean, it's just crazy to see them empty. The top of the Austrian hospice, we were there on the first day they opened, after the first wave of coronavirus here in Israel. So that was amazing. And then the church in Bethlehem that Emily, we're going to have Emily here today, but I mean, it's empty completely, where we have groups waiting for hours to go in and visit. I think that just gives it a very unique touch.
That one, and I really like that some of our guides decided to go to places that are not usually on tours, places that
Right.
are unique to them, and in some ways unique to us as travelers too. But it's very rare you would go to those places on a tour. And I saw Shai taking us to his neighborhood, and that was definitely fascinating. I watched his videos and I really enjoyed, because it's stuff I've been in Jaffa and Tel Aviv a million times, and some of the areas he was talking about I haven't seen or haven't noticed. I might have passed by, but I didn't notice the stories he was talking about. So that was really unique.
Well,
To our topic, who do you want to start with, Kim?
I'm gonna give you the honors.
Okay. Well, we saw Nabil already on the video, so how about we bring Nabil in? And Nabil is a tour guide who's worked with us in Majdi for, I don't know, 7-8 years, something like that. And I remember meeting him first time. We met to talk about him potentially working with Majdi, and I was fascinated by the history. Definitely, Nabil comes from the Coptic community, which is especially prominent in Egypt, but also there is a community in Jerusalem. I think maybe in the West Bank. We can hear a little bit more from Nabil about that. Hello, Nabil. We can't hear you, man. You need to unmute yourself now.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me now?
You're matching the colors, your shirt, touch behind, you do.
It's green color today.
So Nabil, tell us about yourself, and tell us about how do Coptics in Jerusalem. It's when you talk about the Coptic community, the first thing that comes to people's mind is Coptics, Egypt, where there are over 10, maybe about 10 million, 7 to 10 million people, more or less. We don't think of Coptics in Jerusalem. So what are you doing, and who are the Copts anyway?
Well, we're among the very, very few Copts that still are around in Jerusalem today. In numbers, there's about 1,000 people of Coptic origin that lives in Jerusalem today, who of course started out in Egypt, as you mentioned. Egypt is the motherland, Egypt is the origin, and it had to do with Christianity spreading to Egypt. So when you talk about the Bible and the story of the flight to Egypt, or the escape of Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus, that was the way to go into Egypt and feel safe there, and mentioning Egypt as a place that the Holy Family stayed. So with this, you have an interest of being in Egypt and Christianity that spread through one of the 4 evangelists, the Saint Mark, actually, who went into Egypt in the 1st century, and Christianity started out in Egypt. And the Copts grew to become a large number in Egypt as of today. And with this, there has been some immigration that brought part of my family from Egypt, probably in the 1700s, early 1800s, and then made a pilgrimage, as my great-grandfather have done, and made his way into Jerusalem to be hosted at a church, and started living in Jerusalem and growing a family there.
So you grew up in the old city.
Yes.
I mean, I could only imagine. Every time I visit the old city, I'm seeing a new spot, and then, you know, hearing a new story, and I can't imagine what it's like to actually grow up within the old city. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, being in the old city was very, very special to me, and I miss it so much because I don't live in the old city anymore. I grew up in the old city when I was a kid. I went to school in the old city until I was about 15 years of age. And I attended school at the De La Salle Brothers, which is actually a Catholic school, right by the New Gate, by the old city. And I remembered very well the times I spent there has been very, very special to me, Because when I go back and guide with people and walk in the Christian Quarter and walk by the New Gate, it gives me back all these memories that I can refer to, and I say, this is where my high school was. This is the streets where I used to play. And they are still the same. Nobody has built a high-rise building. Nobody has done anything different. It looks the same place and the same shopkeepers, the same faces. They just look a little bit older, the people there, than the time I was there.
You know, I also lived in the old city when I was much, much younger. I think I was 19, 20 years old. And I lived in the Christian Quarter. And it was such a fascinating thing. I'll tell you one thing I realized living there. If you believe in the idea of privacy, you cannot live in the old city. There is zero privacy. And by zero, I mean whatever you whisper to your son, father, mother, wife in bed, your neighbors will know about it the next morning. It is so clustered and so crowded, but also it brings this feeling of community. And so everybody knows everyone in the old city.
That's true. That is true. It just finds you no place to play inside the old city. And for us to get outside of the walls or to go outside of, let's say, Jaffa Gate and play there a little bit when there was more space, that was really the place to get away and have more place to play than just being in the small streets of the old city. Or going and climbing on the walls. The rampart walks of the old city of Jerusalem was one of the things we did as we were kids. It's, you know, after opening hours, you just climb the wall and you're up at the walls of Jerusalem. One of the fascinating things I remember as a kid, going up on top of the ramparts and walking on the walls of Jerusalem.
Well, can you tell us maybe briefly about how did the Coptic Church become a Coptic church? Meaning, this is something I've been learning about even more this week, just because preparing for this session. And many of the Eastern churches, the Coptic Church is an Eastern church, and it seems that the Eastern Church has many small splinters that have come out that are still Eastern in the way they do services, in prayers are very Eastern, but they're more independent. And the Orthodox Church in some ways is, you have the Russian Orthodox and you have the Coptic Orthodox and you have the Greek Orthodox, which is very strong in the Palestinian and in Palestinian territories and in Israel. So how did the Coptic Church become the Coptic Church?
Mm-hmm. Good question, really. It goes back to claiming the Coptic faith, or Copts, as being the first Christians to convert and become Christians in the time there was persecution by the Roman Empire. And that would be the early 4th century, in the early 300s AD or CE. And Christians were not really practicing Christianity. And in Egypt, through Mark, or Saint Mark, who started to come out actually in a place called Alexandria, not Virginia, of course, but Alexandria, Egypt. Yeah, as we have a place close to, maybe Aziz knows, in Virginia, but it comes to my mind sometimes. So Egypt, Alexandria, became a city that was known for Christians as being Copts. And they started building out churches. Yeah, churches were started to be built by the early 4th century in Egypt, in Alexandria, and it became one of the main Christian cities for Copts. It's actually mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Acts, that mentioned the Jewish presence in Alexandria at the time. And it says many Jews have lived in Alexandria, and with Christianity spreading, some of the Jews have converted and became Christians through Coptic faith. So that would be the early start of the church as Copts. But what differentiates us from other Orthodox churches like the Greek Orthodox or the Armenian Orthodox is the follower we have, which is like a pope. And our pope is based in Alexandria in the main church in Egypt, and he is the one that people follow. So Egyptian Copts believe that Mark was the first pope, Saint Mark was the first bishop or the first pope for Copts, and it continued many generations after, as we have today Tawadros II, who is the pope since 2012, that Eastern Orthodox Copts in Egypt and all around the world follow as their main leader. Like for the Catholics, you have the Vatican and you have the Pope.
Nabil, can you talk about the tattooing? I know that there's a small shop in the old city, but there's a huge story behind it.
Right. So when I refer back to my family origins and my great-grandfather, Jirius, who came to Jerusalem many, many years ago, he brought with him a lot of his old tools and needles and some basic electrical wirings, and came to Jerusalem with what he have learned probably in Egypt as something that the Egyptian Copts have done by tattooing their wrists with a cross and identifying themselves as Christians. So this was brought back by my great-grandfather to Jerusalem, and he felt as a mission for himself that he should tattoo pilgrims or people who come to Jerusalem as a good memory to keep with them and not forget what they did when they were in Jerusalem to have a tattoo. This has brought fame to him, as you see some of the pictures that are coming up now. This is actually my house when I lived as a young kid. This picture was taken in the 1970s, and that door leads upstairs actually to where we grew up as a family, where my grandfather lived and then my father. So it is a fond memory really to remember generations of tattooing up until today, where one of my cousins is actually tattooing in his studio in the Old City area, where many, many people have been coming to be tattooed. Tattooing had to do with identity for Christian Copts, and with actually what I found out is the suffering of Jesus on the cross and the blood spilling. When you tattoo, you're probably going to spill a little bit of blood, or it's going to hurt. So it will remind you of the suffering and of the blood of Jesus to have a tattoo.
Well, thank you so much, Nabil. This was very informative, fascinating. I've seen that tattoo place for a long time. And who knows, maybe your family and Kim's family somewhat knew each other 1,000 years ago in Egypt, since Kim has Egyptian roots, and my family as well. My mother is Egyptian. So the three of us have that Egyptian connection.
Interesting. Great.
Thank you, Nabil. Stay with us. We'll get back to you. And if anyone has questions for Nabil, then he'll join back near the end, and we'll ask him some more questions. So feel free to write them down for us.
Thank you.
And I think this will move to Emily now, who's also here in the region. Emily is actually streaming from Bet Zahur, Palestine today. Here we go. Hi, Emily.
You need to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, great to see you.
How are you,
Good to see you
Emily?
too. I'm good.
Thank
How are
you
you?
for joining us. Good, good. Thanks for joining us. Happy to have you on with us today. Emily actually is also guiding with us, and you also saw her on the video. Do you want to talk a bit about where you did the videos, the 360 videos, and talk about the experience?
Yes, I've taken the video in several places in Bethlehem. The first one was in front of the wall where Banksy's hotel is now built. So it shows all the graffiti and how the protesters protest peacefully, but in a very nice way that attracted tourism into Palestine. I consider it a way that highlighted the occupation again in a good way and brought people to think about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and put it as a card on a table. And the second place is the Nativity Church, where it's always busy, it has a lot of people, and it's actually very hard to get in, even as a local, to go on a Sunday Mass. This time it was empty. There was only me and the police, and it felt it felt very different. I enjoyed it, and I hope you can see the video. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked when I saw it. I couldn't believe that it was empty. I mean, grateful for you for taking the camera and filming there. So Emily, you're part of the Orthodox Palestinian community. Can you discuss the Palestinian approach or how the community sees Greek Orthodox Church?
Well, before I answer your question, I would like to introduce myself and tell a bit where does this big family come from. My name is Emily Rishmawi. I'm from Beit Sahur, the Shepherd's Field town. It's located 1 kilometer south Bethlehem. It's called the Shepherd's Field because the shepherds who witnessed Jesus' birth were actually here. They received the message of the nativity on those fields. I live actually 50 meters from the church that was built by Saint Elena in the 4th century. So the shepherds could have been exactly where my house is located. So I'm very proud of that. I have a master's in public policies and political action. It's the other photo actually. No, not this. Yes, these are two photos that are taken from my house. The one on the right is the current Shepherd's Field, and the other one is taken in the 50s. I have a master's in public policies and political action from France. When I came back to Palestine, I worked in an NGO in tourism and development of Palestine. I figure out that there's a lot of information about my own country that I don't know. Palestine have lived a lot of conflicts and wars. There's a lot of politics going on in here, and history and religious mixture. So to fill up these gaps, I studied tour guiding, and that's how I combine between politics, religion, and history. I always believed in changing the world, but to do this first, I had to invest in myself. So Christians of this country, we consider ourselves the roots of Jesus. The house where my family lived is 200 years old, and the house of my grandma, where you just know this. Now you can put the photo. Actually, the house of my grandma. Well, this house is 450 years old, and it is 20 meters next to the Nativity Church. On top of this photo, you can actually see the bells of the Nativity.
That's beautiful.
My family, yeah. Now it's renovated. That's why you see it very fancy. But that's why my family was always Orthodox. And my great-grandfather has been an Orthodox priest that started his service from Beit Sahur during the Ottoman Empire era, and then moved to Gaza during the British Mandate, and then to Egypt, and then back to Beit Sahur, where all my family is now living. Yeah, this is my great-grandfather. Beit Sahur is a town of 15,000 people, approximately. It is one of the last, about this picture, this is taken in the Shepherd's Field. These are my aunts and uncles that are, if you can see, there's a sheep that is being sacrificed. And this is what it's an Orthodox tradition. And this is what people used to do as a sacrifice when you say, they pray to God and say, God, if you give me this will, I will sacrifice a sheep. So this is what they actually did. Beit Sahur is special because it is the one of the last towns that is of a majority of Christians. It's not a big majority, it's 60% to 40%. These Christians are from 4 different denominations. Greek Orthodox, that I come from, and it's the majority. And then the Catholic, the Roman Catholics, and the Lutherans. And before I continue and tell you how we approach the church, I just want to say special greetings to Professor Robert Karmer, who is watching us now. And these photos that you have just seen, they were revived by him while he was digging in our family history to write a book about my grandmother.
Awesome.
That's amazing. Thank you.
So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, the Orthodox Church is the largest church in, definitely in the Palestinian areas. It is very important, the Greek Orthodox specifically. How did the Greek Orthodox become the dominant church in Palestine and eventually in Israel as well?
Palestinians are all Christians. We all know that Christianity have started from Palestine, Jesus' birth in Bethlehem, and then being crucified in Jerusalem. And then this is where all the apostles have went all over the world to tell about Jesus. So the first church was actually Byzantine, and this is where Orthodox come from. And it has been spread all the world. And then we had the schism, where Catholic have been created in the world. And I think the whole denomination thing, it's a political thing. That's why we have a lot of Christian denominations nowadays. But we in Palestine, we believe that the Orthodox Church currently, or have always been controlled by the Greeks, like people from Greece. And I would like to talk about why the Orthodox Church now owns a lot of property in Palestine. It's because, but going back in history, people who owned lands, especially in the Ottoman era, they were forced to pay taxes. So in order to avoid paying these taxes, they put the ownership or the custody of their lands under the name of the church. So the Orthodox Church now owns all the, or kept all the ownership of these lands. What we are very upset of is that the Orthodox Church is controlled by a Greek patriarch from Jerusalem. He is ruling from there. He has sold, rented, and still selling a lot of lands to the Israelis, which made people angry with the church. So in Palestine, we don't call ourselves Greeks or Orthodox, we call ourselves Palestinian Orthodox. This have created a big disappointment for people. And currently the Orthodox denomination is divided with pro-patriarch and anti-patriarch. I'll give an example about that. In 1952, the Orthodox Patriarch, and when I say patriarch, I do not mean a particular person, I mean the Orthodox Patriarch as an institution. They rented a land for the Israeli government for 99 years, and it's today where the Knesset building is located. So according to this rent contract, the Israeli government has the right to extend its rental for this land as much as they want without even asking back the patriarch. This is like a line in the contract. This is one example, but such behavior was repeated in many other examples that made Palestinian Orthodox feel betrayed by their own church. And that made them in a weak position in front of the Palestinian public opinion, especially that it is of a Muslim majority.
Thank you, Emily. Well, we'll get back to you in a little bit, but let's move to Joe and then to Andrew, if that's okay, Shannon. And let's have Joe. Joe is also another unique person. I mean, everyone we're having today is very unique, but unique in the sense of the mixture. Because even among, the Holy Land, even the Arab world, communities seem to segregate a lot of times and not mix with each other. And Joe, you are a product of an Armenian and a Catholic. You are half Armenian, half Catholic. And that's not very common even among the Christian community. I mean, I remember an Orthodox friend of mine wanting to marry a Catholic, and how hard it was for that. It was maybe as bad or worse from a community accepting and family of marrying someone from a totally different religion. And that was 20 years ago. I don't know if it's changed. Hopefully it has become easier. So this is your background. You're also a tour guide. You've just got your license, so excited to have you and hopefully start working. together soon. Can you tell us about the Catholic, well, first about yourself? You are a musician, you are involved in a lot of things, and a little bit about both, maybe the Catholic and the Armenian communities.
Well, actually, my background became like more complicated as I got engaged to my Jewish girlfriend. Yeah, and also my sister got married to one of the descendants of Al-Hajj Amin al-Husseini. So, yeah. So you can say I don't know, like maybe this is the picture of Jerusalem, or maybe the future Jerusalem, that's how it should be, as we should be like combined people, and I hope that will happen. So yes, I'm descended from a Catholic family, mixed, and because of these combinations, I used to be always confused about my identity, as my grandfather also grew between the Armenians, so he used to take me with him to meet the Armenian community in Jerusalem as I was a kid. So I grew up more with the Armenian people in Jerusalem, and this is how I also became a musician. That I learned the Armenian folk music, and this is how I was introduced to the Armenian culture, which is a unique culture here in Israel. And you can say like it's kind of like it's, I don't know how to say it, like it's kind of a secretive community, because we don't actually interact with people from outside the community, unfortunately, and I hope that will change very soon. And that's, you know, that's how I learned about everything I know so far. And the thing is that the Armenians have been here since the 4th century, and we call the people who lived here before the Armenian genocide the Kakatsim, who had heritage here since the 4th century and even before, because according to a lot of historians, Armenians actually were the first nation and the first kingdom converted to Christianity, and which actually gave the Armenian the first Armenian who came here. They were actually also the first pilgrims, and also one of the first also hermits, who also combined of building the first churches, first lauras, and first communities in Christian communities in the country.
When you grew up with these two different, stories or narratives, what were you taught to look at first? I mean, how did you define this mixture?
It was very complicated to me, because, you know, in my school I learned something, outside of the school I learned something. So what am I? You know, it's something complicated. Am I Palestinian? Am I just a Christian? Am I Armenian? Am I Israeli? It was always difficult to me to find my true identity, and which also made it worse that Jerusalem, when we talk about Jerusalem, we talk about East and West. So I was born in East Jerusalem, and the thing is that I struggled to be an Israeli citizen, and it took me like around 8 years to fight the battle to become a citizen and to obtain a passport, so I could at least, you know, travel outside the country. So I never truly understood what am I, you know. Okay, my heritage is Armenian, and also you could say Palestinian. I was born in a country that it's under Israeli authority. So am I Israeli? It always actually kind of, you know, I had this kind of mixed feelings. And the thing is that, you know, the Jews see you as a Christian, as an Arab in the country, and the Muslim majority also sees you as like a Christian, which is like, it's kind of also a cultural conflict and a difference. So to be honest with you, until now, I don't know. So you can say that I consider myself as a Jerusalemite.
That's awesome because that's exactly how I refer to myself. When people ask me wherever I go, where are you from? And I say, I'm from Jerusalem. And I feel the Jerusalem identity is the strongest, but it confuses people and I enjoy it because they start to think, is he Jewish? Is he Muslim? Is he Christian? What is he? And they want to put you in a box. And by saying I'm from Jerusalem, they don't know what box to put you in and they'll try to figure it out. And I try not to answer right away because I don't want people to judge me based on preconceived concept of who should I be. So this is fascinating.
To prove your word, like when I used to travel playing music outside the country, I faced that in the airports, like when they used to look at my CPAC, which is like a travel document, and you always have to have a visa. So most of the time I was lucky that somebody else do it for me, because otherwise like I would never actually travel outside, because I don't have the patience, to do it and go to the embassies and, obtain a visa. That's not me. So we used to look at this passport. What are you? and I used to tell them like, you tell me, what am I? So yeah, I faced this problem, and I don't know, like even now, after like hard battle, after I got my full rights, which is it's something that at least like you can do here, fortunately. But it took me like a while, as when I looked at my partner and she said like, oh, I got it like in 2 weeks. And seriously, like I lived here in generations and I got it in 8 years. So we have a problem, but I think there was always a solution.
Well, thank you, Joe, and we'll come back a little later. Hopefully we'll have still time for questions. I have quite a few myself. This is all fascinating. We'll have to probably do a part 2 of this and bring everyone back, I'm sure. And Andrew, here is we getting Andrew. Andrew is a very, very dear friend, and I have to say how we met. We both met at TED, at the TED Fellows Conference. Andrew is one of those super talented human beings, an artist, a speaker, just everything you want to put together, he's there. And we met playing, right? That's kind of when we really got to know each other. We played chess together, but we decided to not use any rules for our chess game. That you can do whatever you want. You decide every one of us decide how many pieces you can take and which directions you move. And we spent like an hour doing that and having probably the best hour of the whole conference, and not once did we disagree. We were like, oh yeah, feel free, go ahead. So that's how we met. But Andrew, you are Lebanese American. You come from Lebanon, and you bring in some ways you're representing another part of the Christian community, which is a Protestant community. It's often, when people talk about the Middle East, we talk about the Catholics and the Orthodox, and Protestants sometimes are seen as outsiders. And even when I was talking to you a couple of days ago, I'm like, so your parents weren't, what were you? And you converted probably to Protestant. Were you Catholic? Were you Orthodox? And you're like, no, my family, I grew up as a Protestant. My family were Protestant. So can you tell us about that community? And about your faith and how there's a big difference in Protestantism. In some ways, you have to claim it yourself. It doesn't matter that your family had it. So can you share a bit of that with us?
Sure, happy to. Just to say, I resonated a lot with what Joe was saying in terms of the identity crisis, because both of my parents were born and raised in Beirut. They met each other in a Protestant Christian youth group called El Muntalikun. They're roughly translated to the front runners. And this might resonate with some of the listeners. The youth group was formed because they felt that the institutional churches weren't doing enough for the people. So a bunch of late teenagers essentially got together and formed this youth group. They would self-fund. They would hire themselves out as ushers to the big festivals in Baalbek. They had a bookstore / like artist consignment store in downtown Beirut, and with the money, they would pool together and they would do public works. They would go to the villages and say, build a small library or do a water system or a sewer pipes, that sort of thing. And so this group lasted just about until the start of the Civil War. And then, like many people, my folks, they were young, they were in their early 20s, and my dad felt like, in a war, you can't start a family. So there were other people in his life that were like, well, we think that you guys should start a family, so we're going to get you out of here. So they landed, of all places in the world, in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and that's where I was born. And over the next couple of years, I grew up in essentially a family church. I was dedicated as a young child, so there wasn't the tradition of infant baptism. And the story is when my folks attempted to have Bible study as a family, sit around the dining room table, open the book, and try to read, I became very agitated as a child and ran away. And so my parents had a choice to make whether to, force me to sit and listen or to let me go and then they would go pray. And they chose the latter. So they let me kind of do whatever I needed to do and not sit, and they went and prayed. And so there's this idea in the Protestant faith that it is communal in a sense, but the expression of faith or the relationship to your faith is very personal. And so it wasn't until I was 31 that I was actually baptized. But I can tell you, very explicit experiences of God working in my life over the course of my life prior to that moment. And that was the dynamic that I was raised in. My parents were both had that kind of belief, and so it wasn't really tied to our bloodline necessarily. My mom's family is from Iraq. Her parents were Catholic and Presbyterian. My dad's family would probably claim some sort of faith, but not be specific about it in terms of their lineage. And so it was really interesting when we tried to find churches in America. We would go to one and they would say, oh, you guys are from the Middle East, so you should sit with all the Arabs. And we're like, wait, what? Like, how does that work? And you go to another one and they're splitting people up, like all the men sit on the right, all the women sit on the left. And my folks were, they had come from this very dynamic youth group, and all these rules and kind of institutional ideas of where people should fit would, it wouldn't sit well with us. So my journey in terms of finding community in the States, being looked at as an outsider ethnically, was a very interesting journey.
It's funny you mentioning that, because I was reading that majority of Arabs in America are actually Christian, not Muslim. And when people talk about Arabs in the United States, they right away think, oh, you Arab, you must be a Muslim, because there's this association, Arabs are Muslim and blah, blah, blah. Which, at least in America, that is not true. Not only in America, you go to countries, especially in Latin America, like Colombia or like Chile, which has a huge Lebanese and Palestinian specifically communities, many of whom has actually rose to power and been presidents and prime ministers. And the vast majority, almost all of them, are Christian. And they Arab, but they Christian. And people, there's this concept, and I struggle with it, is like, oh, if you're Arab, you must be a Muslim. And that's not true. Arab can be Christian, can be Jewish, actually. I have Jewish friends who still identify as Arab Jew, not many, but a few who do, can be Christian, can be Muslim, can be whatever it is. And I think it's something that I even see people travel, whether to Lebanon or to Palestine or to all these places, and come back a week later. I remember a pastor who did a tour and wrote an article about how he traveling through, and all these Arab Muslims have built these houses around the churches. I'm like, dude, you were in a Christian village. 10 days taking your church and to Bethlehem, and very upset that those Muslims are living in Bethlehem and these Muslims are living in Nazareth. You're talking about Christians. It's not only Muslims who live there. And I remember having an exchange with him, and he didn't know. He was shocked that there are Christian Arabs, and the guy was leading a tour there for 10 days and didn't know. So, Kim, I know you had a question. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it's this idea in itself that brought us to talk about the diversity in the Middle East, because I think that a lot of people are not aware. I mean, I told you the story about even me as an Israeli, that there was someone that didn't want to give us alcoholic drinks because he heard we're from Israel, so we must be Muslim, and we don't drink. So that was a first for me. But I do think that there is a lot of I don't know, ignorance, or just there are so many groups. And my question, Andrew, was, are there additional communities or Christian groups that we should know about in Lebanon, or you were actually talking about additional places in the Middle East that your parents were from? Did you feel that when you're visiting, or from your parents, are there additional communities that we should know about?
I think, you know, the best thing that I can do is speak from my personal experience, and I think the thing that we should assume, especially now, is that everybody is everywhere. I don't think having a general narrative that, like, the Christians in Lebanon are Maronites and that's it, and there isn't anybody else, is helpful to really understanding the dynamism and, like, the breadth of human experience, and from a faith perspective, the multitude of expressions, particularly in Christianity, that exist and that draw people to a relationship with the living God. Like, there's so many, and I think that idea of, you know, I experienced it when I was in college and high school, where somebody would say, "Oh, you're from Lebanon? You must be Muslim." And I'm like, "No, that's that doesn't. Those two things are not. They shouldn't be assumed." And I think the general narratives, wherever they land, take on that. They seed that problem.
Well, maybe we should bring everybody back together and we can see what questions we have. Meanwhile, as that's happening, Andrew, me and you were talking about this idea of spirituality the other day and flipping the Maslow pyramid. And do you want to take a minute to just mention that? Because I thought it was, personally, I thought it was fascinating. I don't know what others think about it.
It's something that I've been toying with. I have a habit of thinking of things that may or may not make sense, but this is one of them. So many of us know the Maslow's triangle and how their basic needs, and the top of the pyramid is this self-actualization, where people have an ability and a recognized desire to make the most of themselves, right? And I always thought, and this has been my journey, it's like when I actually have a clearer vision of how I'm made and who I'm made from, and the fullness of my being is evident. It's not possible, but it's evident. Then I'm able to see that in everybody else. And then I feel very free and very open to kind of the needs that exist and where I slot, like what I can do to fulfill those needs, knowing that at least in my framework, it's God who's working through me to do that. So I wonder if we flip the triangle and we have, everybody experiences this this fullness of being, regardless of their economic or relational equity or capacity at a particular moment. What happens to their ability to see other people in that way and the fulfillment of other people's needs? And so you go the other way. And we talked about this example that, if I know that I'm okay as a being, then I would feel more free to distribute provision. And so the distribution of food would be fulfilled in seeing that, everybody is okay as they are, but maybe they need a thing that I have that I don't actually like. I know if I give, I'll receive. And that distribution becomes like the flow of water as opposed to the building of resources, or the like more of a scarcity mindset, I guess.
Thank you. Kim, you wanna start going through people's questions quickly, and we'll have to answer a quicker way. So which one do you want to choose?
Sure, I'll just say that I think that what connects all of our speakers today is this sense of difficulty to create your identity within where we're living, within the Middle East, and being Christian in the Middle East or outside of the Middle East, but having this affect your identity. One of the questions, and by the way, it's just fascinating to hear that. Someone is asking if we can talk about the word grace and the role that it plays for peace in Israel or the Middle East as a whole. I'm going to say, raise your hand if you think you want to tackle that question. Go ahead, Andrew.
I'll take it. You said the word grace?
Yeah.
I think grace is what gets us to the table. It's the thing that fuels the forgiveness of past sins and future sins. So the only way that I can see myself coming to a quote unquote coming to a table with someone who has offended me, even in a personal sense, is to understand that relationship is covered by grace.
Yeah, and I would say one of my favorite things about the Bible is reading verses like "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." And I did a little bit of Greek digging back in the days, and the word "love" goes here is more of a verb than a noun, and it's if you were to really put it into practice, it means to welcome in, to invite, and to entertain. And I love that verse, which connects to grace, because it basically says grace would lead you to not only emotionally, because you can't just emotionally love your enemy, but to actually do an action about, and that's my favorite probably of Jesus' teaching, is to welcome in and entertain your enemy. Because it's easy to say, yeah, I love him as I'm shooting him. But say, I love him as I'm inviting him to my house and entertaining him. That is a radical kind of change, which sometimes we see and sometimes we don't see. And maybe, Kim, do you want to ask the second one, or do you want me to choose something?
Sure, there's the question for Emily about how you would describe the relationship between the Greek Orthodox, Greek Catholic, and Roman Catholics in Bet Sachor.
It's an interesting question. So the relations between the different denominations in Beit Sahur, it's quite strong and interesting in the same time. As much as people of Beit Sahur are known for being very attached to each other and would stand with each other for any harm or any problem, they would just go help the other. Each one of them is very proud of their denomination. The Orthodox says, I am an Orthodox, and they only go to the Orthodox Church. And the same for the Catholic or the Roman Catholic or the Lutherans, and there are some Protestants too. what I relate this question to myself because my mom is Catholic and my father is Orthodox. And I was raised in a Catholic church or Catholic school, that is. So when I was raised in the house, I had all the Orthodox learning, and at school I had all the Catholic learnings. And it might have created a small conflict for me to say, what am I, Catholic, Orthodox? I liked some things from here, but I like better things from the other denominations. And sometimes I would just go around between them and say, I believe in both. But as growing up, I figure out I just want to be a Christian without a denomination, or saying that I don't want to fight with anyone saying I'm Catholic or Orthodox or anything else, because Jesus wasn't any of them. He was just Jesus. I don't know if this answers the question. Hope so.
Definitely does. You do you.
Yes.
Thank you, Emily. Joe, quick question for you here. If you were raised speaking Armenian as well as Arabic?
I was raised hearing it. My father speaks it fluently, but my mother language is Arabic, as my mother descendants are Lebanese actually. So the language we used at home was Arabic.
Thanks. Nabil, any final or additional notes that you'd like to add to the conversation before we finish up?
Yeah, I just find similarities between a lot of the other speakers who find sometimes a conflict of identity or a conflict of fitting in somewhere, you know. I guess being in Jerusalem as a Jerusalemite also, and trying to fit in between the Jewish majority and maybe the Muslim Palestinians as a Christian Palestinian from an Egyptian background, you feel you're a minority of a minority or a small group, and you want to fit in somewhere and you're not sure, maybe the Catholics, they're pretty big in Israel, maybe the Greek Orthodox, you know, shall we join them? No, we stay Copts, you know. We're simple people from Egypt, and recently as some of the Egyptian Copts have been coming to visit the Holy Land, as our Pope Tawadros have encouraged people to come and visit, it just kind of shows more of the Egyptian Copts coming to visit this part of the world in Israel or in Jerusalem. That's something we haven't seen before, because I've never ever been to Egypt, as originally from Egypt. And I get a lot of questions sometimes from some of my tourists. How is it like in Egypt? And I wasn't born in Egypt. I mean, I'm originally Egyptian, so they keep referring to me as back in Egypt or so, but not knowing that I was born and raised in Jerusalem, which I have to repeat a couple of times or maybe more times for them to understand this. So still finding a conflict of identity or a conflict of where you fit between the people who live in Jerusalem, and try to interact with everyone and try to be a friend with everyone, really.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. I think definitely I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'm so happy to know all of you and be friends with you. And I think I speak for me and Kim and for Majdi Tours and that, and very excited that we've worked all together. Andrew actually have joined us on a Majdi trip and have traveled with me through the country for 10 days. And so we've all done this work together, and it's exciting. And I love it that we have, and we try our best to have that diversity of opinions, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of everything possible, because this land is not homogenous, and it doesn't have a single narrative, and it's so different. And this, in some ways, shows we are different in many ways, but we are united in, and I think, our vision for and hope for a place that would accept us all, and we can live together in a mosaic instead of seeing those differences as something to scare us. Instead, I listen to all the small differences we have and say, this is fascinating. I want to learn more. I want to get immersed in this culture a lot more. And I'm grateful that I have those relationships and I can do that. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. You can definitely see every panelist eye kind of star up when they hear something that's similar to their story, or they can relate to it. So that's always nice. We'll just say a word about next week. We're continuing the diversity, continuing the series of People Are People. And we gave it a title of From the Second Exodus to the Black Panthers, because we're talking about the immigration waves coming from Arab countries into Israel. Specifically, the Egyptians called their immigration wave the Second Exodus, but then we moved to Black Panthers, who were actually more from a Morocco or Yemenite descent. But generally, it's just a fancy name talking about the huge immigration waves and the diversity and where they are today. Definitely not a minority, but a diverse set of communities. So join us.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we're talking about Jewish migration.
Right.
But yes, next week it'll be fascinating. We'll talk about basically a large group of the Israeli community. And as usual, we end with it's not where we travel.
It's how.
Right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.